Wrap, Candid, Frank, and live on the BarnBurner TV Network, Zingo TV Channel 250. Remember to download the BarnBurner and Zingo TV apps available on Android and iOS devices. Joining me is Jake Carter. Welcome, Jake. I hope we find you and yours healthy, safe, and well, buddy. Good to see you. The first chance to work together.
Yeah, no, it's exciting, but same to you, Frank. I know everyone here with me. I'm just at home with my family here, but we're all doing well, so it's good to be with you here.
It was a long time ago. It was a whole year ago, I guess. But were you still in diapers then? Why Leonard shot from the corner? Just kidding. Took that shot from the corner, and that ball seemed to take forever to sink. How do you think, if this hadn't happened, obviously there's two ways to look at this. What effect has this coronavirus had on, the NBA and the experience of Toronto sports fans, specifically Toronto NBA fans? This is a great moment, and we just can't celebrate it the way I think many of us hope.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think it's sort of it's great to look back on, and it was such a great moment, like you said, for Toronto sports fans and Raptors fans. But I think being the 1 year anniversary, exactly, it's not the way that we maybe would have envisioned it last year. No one could have predicted what we're going through, obviously, but it's just kind of a weird feeling because you're having to do everything virtually. So you're kind of seeing things on Twitter and you're seeing your friends talk about it, but you can't actually talk with them in person. So it's definitely different, but it was such a great moment for Toronto sports fans.
Do you remember where you were? That's always the question people ask when something like that happens.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to think. I think I was watching it in my apartment in Toronto. So I go to school down there, and I think I would have been down there, but I don't exactly remember it. It's one of those things where I probably should, but I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I would have been down at my apartment down there. So, but not off the top of my head, I don't. So
Too busy celebrating. I mean, it's amazing. Being a young man like you are, the good fortune that you have to witness something like that. You've heard about the lack of success the Toronto Maple Leafs had 50 plus years of not winning a championship. As a guy who covers the Canadian Football League, I've had the good fortune of witnessing and spending some time in some locker rooms watching teams win championships. We've seen the Toronto Rock win a championship in your lifetime. What other, I guess, do you remember the Blue Jay victory? I guess what I'm trying to ask is it ho-hum for you to see do you feel sometimes that you can't relate to the people's anxiousness about teams in Toronto winning championships? Can you relate to that?
yeah, sometimes. I mean, as a Leafs fan, I definitely can because although I am younger, I still, I've been around for obviously all the losses that they've had against Boston and things like that, where, even when I was growing up, they were never, a dynamite team like they're, how they are now. But for me, I mean, um, I guess growing up, I was always a Leafs fan first. But the first Toronto championship probably would have been a Grey Cup that I remember, or even MLS with Toronto FC. But obviously the only major team would have been the Raptors from last year. So I can definitely relate to it, but obviously not as strong as some other people that have been around a little bit longer and have had to kind of sit through some of the losses a little bit more.
Depending on if mom and dad are sports fans, you sort of have disappointment by extension. Have you ever talked to your dad about what it's like to be a sports fan, and does he tell you and say you don't know how lucky you are? Do you get that impression as the next generation witnessing what you just talked about? The Argos, TFC, the Raptors, You've seen that kind of success, and if you're into lacrosse, that happened too. Have you ever had that conversation with your parents, and have you gotten a sense of the disappointment because you haven't personally felt it?
Yeah, yeah, a little bit. I mean, my dad, he's a Montreal Canadiens fan. So I mean, for him, I think when he was growing up, they were pretty successful, and then in '93 as well. But I think we've never really had a specific conversation about it. I think he knows I'm a Leafs fan, so sometimes we'll kind of go back and forth, and we'll always there's a little bit more interest when the Leafs play the Habs, but. Um, a little bit, but I think, I do consider myself lucky to be, this, just 20 years old and already have seen a championship from the Raptors. So it's something, and I definitely, I don't take it for granted because, it's obviously something that doesn't happen very often, especially here in Toronto. So I think that it was so exciting to watch last year. Not even, just like I was never a huge basketball fan growing up. I've sort of been a bigger fan the past few years and starting to get into it more, but just watching how excited the city was of Toronto last year and the country of Canada all across Canada with all the watch parties and everything, it was really exciting to see.
And what's really exciting is the fact that you get to experience it and you get to talk about it. How important was that in making the career determination that you did?
Yeah, it was kind of a crazy, just how it worked out, I guess, with me. Last year was my first year in school in Toronto at the College of Sports Media, and then I was kind of thinking back, like, who would have thought that my first year of school, where we exclusively talk sports about Raptors and Leafs and the Argos, like all the Toronto teams mostly, that the Raptors would have that much success, just in my first year doing it. So it's definitely a lot of fun being able to go to school and talk about, with all my classmates and that have become my friends and everything. It's just so unique, I think, just to, everybody has the same passion, and that makes it a lot of fun, and it's a lot of, it's really exciting to be a part of, I guess.
Okay, let's put you to work now. No more fun talk about you, what you're doing, and why you're doing it. Let's put you to work.
Yep.
Hockey parents, and let's expand it. We when we talk about sports, you talk about sports. We enjoy talking about the pros and talking about sports in that kind of vein, right? But sports runs far deeper than that. In your opinion, the issue now, hockey parents, soccer parents, soccer moms, all that stuff. Sometimes we joke about, the responsibility that parents have, and you're not far out of being, under your parents' wing. Uh, what are people missing the most out of that? How do you think this affects everything? Do you see an effect where you are, from your perspective, on even not just the pros, but the minor sports people as well?
Yeah, I think there's a huge effect on it, and I think that, for a lot of families, especially in Canada, but for me personally, just playing minor hockey growing up and minor softball as well, that was huge for me and my friends to be able to, not just socialize at school and things like that, but to be able to get out and really have fun and doing what we love, which was sports. So I think that there's a huge effect on it, not just, um, on the kids, but the families as well. And it'll be really interesting to see, I think, what happens here in the fall and even in the summer with things like baseball and soccer and football and everything like that. So, it'll be really interesting to see what happens, and if they do go ahead, what safety measures or what things will be in place that we aren't used to.
I'm fairly old, and I still remember how preoccupied my parents were back in the day when helicopter parents didn't exist. But now, with the advent of helicopter parents, I mean, I can't imagine what it's going to be like to say, okay, let's take the kids to the soccer group, let's take them to hockey, let's go mingle with everybody. it's going to be there's going to be some real tough decisions being made, and some decisions that we shouldn't even be making and we shouldn't be considering. But fear is the ultimate motivator, and it's the biggest challenge that even once we come out the other side of this, that sports are going to have to deal with. There's going to be a lot of change, but as a young man, you're not stuck in history as much as I am, so it might be easier for you. So help me understand, as a youthful person, a young person, looking at something like this that is probably nothing unusual for you. Oh, this is, as far as you're concerned, this happens every other year, right? For me, I spent a lifetime not experiencing anything like this. Give us your vantage point and how you think sports will look after this.
Yeah, I think there's obviously a lot of unknowns, I think, but I think, there, whether it be, I think the biggest change will probably be until there's a vaccine. And I think that after that, the restrictions might be a little bit looser. But I think if sports do go ahead, I think, there'll obviously probably have to be something with social distancing, and whether that be changing some rules of certain sports, or even things I know, like, in professional sports, but minor sports as well, like the idea of a locker room, and how that would work off of the field or the ice or things like that. So I think it's going to be a lot different for everybody involved, but I think the main thing is just that social distance where we're not used to it. And I think that'll obviously, it'll be something that'll have to be implemented.
I believe you're right, and where the challenge is going to be is resetting the dial, because parents have when it comes to minor sports, parents have issues that other people who aren't parents don't understand, and don't understand the gravity and the importance of that, and especially their children. Their children, you would think, don't get it, but I'm beginning to wonder. I mean, if you're a 10-year-old and you're living this right here, I wonder how it affects you down the road. The side effects of this whole situation will be something that I think we'll have to deal with for a very long time, and it's sad, really. It's something that we need to figure out, and I hope we do, because the last thing we want, I think, as a society, is to lose our contact with sports and socializing. And this could be, pretty, as much as people are saying, well, it's only sports, right? But it's everything. It's entertainment, it's concerts, it's all that stuff. And as a person, a young person, how deeply has it affected you? All the different ways it has affected you. Are there ways that you want to share with us that people you don't think are talking about?
Yeah, well, I think for me the main thing is probably sports, but I think aside from that, I think it's just the general idea of socialization and things like that. I think just not being able to go out and see your friends, or things like that, I think are the biggest thing for me. But um, I think the main thing, like all those things you mentioned with sports and concerts and things like that, it's really all about, an outlet, I guess, for people to sort of, not tune out, but to get away from things a little bit, and to just relax and enjoy things. So I think the biggest thing is just, entertainment and sports and concerts and all that thing, all of those things are just so important to society, just to be able to get away for a bit and kind of, um, you know, have a little bit of fun. So, um, but I think the biggest thing for me would probably just be the socialization part of it.
Now, we'll go with the segue, not the thing you stand on. Be a segue from
Yeah.
being a parent to WWE's Becky Lynch. She announced she's pregnant, and she has relinquished her title. This Raw Women's Champion makes a change, and has a change happen in her life. How interesting is that?
Yeah,
What do you know about wrestling, and what do you know about how this will affect the WWE?
Yeah, well, I'll admit I'm not the biggest wrestling guy, but it is a pretty substantial move. I think just for her to be on top, to be the champion, and then to relinquish the belt. I think it's it's a really interesting move for a variety of reasons, but I think obviously the main thing is that it's great to see. I think as a whole that it's exciting for her, and although um, she has to relinquish it, it's definitely a personal decision, obviously, and a great one to see for her.
That's good for her. Congratulations to her. And I'm sure that we've seen great athletes. I can think of a tennis player who was pregnant and won championships while Vanessa, anyway, won championships while she was pregnant and then came back and continued to win championships. So we know one thing, a woman that gets pregnant doesn't lose either her desire or ability to be a champion. And we wish her the best of luck and hope she has a swift and easy pregnancy. Congratulations to Becky Lynch. Moving on, the police in England were giving English Premier League teams a little bit of grief that they wanted the teams to play in neutral sites. How do you feel about neutral sites, and how important is it, and this covers all sports, neutral sites as opposed to home stadiums? Does the fact that the Red Sox don't play, in their home park, which is famous, does that matter? Is that something that, another reason why baseball won't be the same, no fans, not in the same stadium? Does that relate, or does it matter to you?
Yeah, I think it matters. I think that, I think that it definitely plays a part in the outcome of a game. I think, at least for, whether you talk about momentum and if that's a real thing or if it's effective or things like that. But I think that um, a home crowd can really energize the home team and play a part in the game. But I think when you kind of take a step back and look at it from a bigger point of view and the times that we're in right now, I think that it's fair and honestly, it's probably necessary if we do want sports to come back. And I think that a neutral site is something that we might have to get used to for the next little bit.
The NHL has been talking about that. The NHL more than any other league, well, actually equally to TFC, there's that crossing the border that happens a lot, and the league itself, MLS, has those games they play with Mexico, the friendlies, all that stuff. So we know how affected the MLS is. In the NHL, with their minor league, their minor league of the AHL, the American Hockey League, with them ending their season, as a hockey fan, and give us your insight into the challenges that, for example, the Toronto Maple Leafs and other teams in the National Hockey League, including the fact that they're on different sides of the border, how the impact of the AHL canceling their season completely, something we know here in Toronto. We know the Marlies matter for making the Toronto Maple Leafs have a lineup each and every game. They've relied on that franchise for a very long time. Express to us the challenges now that the Leafs and the NHL finds itself in with the AHL canceling the season.
Yeah, well, I mean, first, right off the bat, you start to wonder about injuries and things like that for the NHL team. What would happen then if the AHL team isn't playing? But I think the at least what I've heard early from nothing official, but or what I've read online is that the NHL teams will have a select few, a number of players, I guess, that are kind of like a taxi squad. Like they will travel with the team and not necessarily dress every night, but they'll be with the team in case they need to be called up or play or things like that. So I think that's the smart option of it. And I think there's really no way around that because teams, if the NHL does get back up and running and playing, teams will definitely run into problems with injuries or call ups and things like that. So I think the only way to do this is to have those number of players that are kind of on standby, ready to go with the NHL team.
And COVID approved, because we know how quickly turnabout has to happen when a player gets injured on Wednesday. Many a time there's another game on Friday, and they need to put that player in on Friday. And if they aren't one of the extra bodies that are practicing with the team, you have to go to the AHL because, as we all know, just because you have 3 or 4 players, if 3 defensemen go down, the 3 or 4 players that you have on the taxi squad, or 5, or black shirts, whatever you want to call them, they're not all defensemen. So, they're different positions. You have an extra goaltender, you have an extra defenseman, you have an extra forward. So that is the other challenge, is that, you have different nationalities on the team. So if you have an injury, right, on your team, and it's an American kid who's sitting somewhere in the U.S., they have to come to Canada, and by virtue of what Mr. Trudeau said, they have to wait 2 weeks before they can use them. That's the kind of motivator, I think, like you said, that they're going to have it. That's the reason why they need to have a taxi squad. So the teams are going to be a little bigger. They're going to spend a little more money on the NHL team, right? But they're foregoing the cost that the AHL team is to every NHL franchise, because they're not really, I don't think many of the teams, Manitoba Moose may be excluded, and a few other teams, are not money makers in the American Hockey League. They strictly are a place to put players, to prepare them to come to the big league.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that's a big thing too, in that the AHL, like you said, like they're mostly a gate-driven league where the a lot of the money comes from either their revenue, I guess, comes from the fans in the stands. So um that's obviously that would have been a bigger problem, probably the biggest problem for them, and one of the reasons why they decided to cancel their season. But um it does make you wonder, a little bit about um, just development and things like that with the players. But I think it was the right move, and we'll see how it affects the NHL.
I'll file this under strange. You don't really need to comment, but for the viewers, I'd like to mention this. Kobe Bryant Sports Academy retires the Mamba nickname. Strange. I would never have suspected an act like that, something like that. It almost sounds like they're distancing themselves from Kobe. I know they're probably not, but how do you feel about that? You would think that in a situation like this, that name would be enshrined. It's the same reason we just talked about the Marlies. The Leafs use the Marley name because it's so old and so attached to the Maple Leaf organization.
Yeah, it when I saw that, it did take me as a surprise, because yeah, you would think that they would leave that to honor him in a sense. It almost seems like it's kind of the opposite, taking it away, but a surprising move, to say the least, I think.
Nikhil Kumar, she qualified for the Olympics in table tennis at the Tokyo Games. While we have talked about how impacted athletes have been, whether it be football players, soccer players, everybody, they've all been affected. Basketball players. She thinks it's not so bad because she can practice at home. She doesn't have to practice out in the open, and her regimen, she feels really lucky. To quote her, she says, "For my sport, a little lucky that we're able to have everything indoors, and it's not taking up too much space and everything. Not many sports are as lucky as ours is right now, to be able to have the opportunity to continue playing on a daily basis. That's a rarity today, and that's a blessing for her and people like her. Isn't that's a good story? I just wanted to throw that out there because everything we seem to talk about, Jake, is negative. That's a positive kind of thing. So some people are not being as adversely affected as others, and that's one of the nice things, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I think that's probably one of the more rare instances where, you hear about all these athletes who can't get into their team facilities and are working out from home. So that's a great story to hear, that there's still some athletes out there that are able to do their own workouts and train from home.
How it must be frustrating to not like Bo Levi Mitchell yesterday in an interview. Well, not really an interview, but anyway, an opportunity to be interviewed by a group. He claimed he couldn't wait till he got his hands on leather. Why? He had been injured for like almost a year and a bit. He had an injury that's been nagging, and he hasn't been able to get away from the injury. And now he's healthy, and he can't wait to get out there. There are a lot of athletes like that, Jake, who were injured, and when before this thing started, they were going, "Oh my God, I'm going to miss 3-4 months." And some of them have already healed to the point where they now are in a position where they're going, "Wait a second, I'd like to play."
Yeah, no, for sure. I can think there's a number of them just in the NHL, that were injured or, a broken bone or something before this all happened, and now they're good to go if it would start up. So it's just crazy to think about.
Yeah, nobody would have predicted this. If I were to ask you one answer or one thought that you'd like to share with everybody when it comes to the COVID, whether it's about sports, whether it's about yourself, whether it's about life in general, what would be the biggest thing? And I'm sure there's multiple things, but one that pops into your head that you've learned through this experience that you didn't realize and you really consider it's something that I actually learned I would never have thought of unless I was in this condition, or this situation. What would that be?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think, a big one is just kind of setting sports aside and kind of taking a step back, I think, for me, and just kind of realizing what's important. I think, family and friends and things like that are really the biggest takeaway, I think, for me. Just what matters most. I think you can always have hobbies, but I think just taking a bigger perspective, I think, on life.
Only because I want to put words in your mouth. I'll add something else for both of us, and I'll assume this goes for you as well. We're very lucky to be able to do this way and still impact or accomplish what we want to do. As sportscasters, this is the smallest price we have to pay, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. Exactly.
Thanks, Jake. I really appreciate you being here with me. For Jake Carter, I'm Candid Frank. Thank you for watching Sports Wrap, Candid Frank, and live on the BarnBurner TV Network and on Zingo TV Channel 250. Remember to download the BarnBurner and Zingo TV apps available on Android and iOS devices. Don't forget about the BarnBurner Radio Network, which is available on 122 platforms. Watch us, hear us, read us, and of course, download us. I'm Candid Frank. He's Jake Carter. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Until next time.